Today in Latin, we're going to learn about third and fourth conjugation verbs in the indicative mood. But before we talk about that, let's talk about what differentiates all of the different conjugations and how you can tell the verbs apart. First conjugation, amo, amare, you go to that second principal part, the infinitive, it always ends in long are. Second conjugation, dokeo, dokere, go to the infinitive again, it always ends in a long ere. Third conjugation, whether it's regular or io, will always end in a short ere. And fourth conjugation always ends in a long ire. You'll notice that third io verbs and fourth conjugation verbs both end in io in that first principal part. And because of this, they're going to share some similarities in form. Now, when we look at the third conjugation, third io, and fourth conjugation verbs, we're only going to look at the present system because the perfect system of both the active and the passive are perfectly regular. So if you need to review those endings, you can look at the prior video on them. But today we're going to look at just the present system. So for a third conjugation, you'll notice that the present and the future look remarkably similar. No longer do we use bo bis bit for the future. Now we're going to have the vowel be the indicator. So in the present, except for that first principal part, you're going to see an I or a U to signify the present tense. And in the future, you're going to see an A or an E to signify the future tense. So they're very similar. Pay close attention. Moving into the passive, again, those vowels are going to stay similar. So in the present, it's going to be mostly an O or an I or a U to signify it, where in the future it's going to be that A or the E. The only difference here is the second person singular. And for the third conjugation, you have to be very careful for the second person singular passive because they are remarkably similar. The only thing that's different is that long mark over the E. So you're going to have to make careful note of this, and here the long mark does matter. Moving on to the third io conjugation, you're going to notice that that I in the first principal part persists through a lot of this conjugation. So the present's going to look similar to the third conjugation, except that I will start to persist in that third person plural. And then you'll note that that I sticks around in the stem for both the imperfect and the future. Otherwise, the endings are very similar to the third conjugation. And the same thing for the passive. Again, that I is going to stick around a lot in the stem. So note where that happens and note your endings. Again, second person singular, the only difference there is that long mark, so be careful. Now moving to the fourth conjugation. The fourth conjugation and the third io are very, very similar because they share that I that persists in the stem. Here in the present system of the active, it will look almost identical. Again, note that you have an I or a U in the present, an A and an E in the future, and that's really the only thing that differentiates. And then we flip to the passive. The only time that this is very different, the fourth conjugation, than the third io is the second person singular. Here it is iris instead of eris, so now you don't have to be as cognizant of that long mark because you have the vowel switch. But the general endings, the aris, termer, minientor, are things that should be familiar. So you're not learning a ton of different endings per se, but you have to know that the tense signifier, especially for the present and the future, changes when you're looking at the third and fourth conjugation. And when you're looking at the third io and the fourth conjugation, that persistent I from the first principal part will show up in the stem and not go away. So look over these forms, look at some charts, start memorizing your endings, but this should be an easy transition once you already know the first and second conjugation. Again, especially because the perfect system of both the active and passive, which isn't in this video, has the same exact endings. So you don't have to memorize any new endings for the perfect system, only the present system.